Hey everyone, I'm Kela, the head educator at Sunergos Coffee, and today we're going to be making a V60. The V60 is one of my favorite brew methods just because I think it produces a really dynamic cup of coffee. There's a lot you can do with a recipe to change it and tweak it and make it exactly how you like it. The recipe I'm giving you today is a little bit more simple. We try to make it approachable, especially if you've never brewed one before. And once you've practiced a few times, you can then maybe start to tweak some different variables. So the V60 comes in ceramic, which is a classic, really pretty device. And then there's also the plastic version, which is a little bit more durable. And it also has better heat retention. So some people prefer it for that reason, but I really like the ceramic, so that's what we're going with today. So that recipe, just to get us started, it's gonna be a 15:1 ratio. So you're gonna start with 33 grams of coffee. We're gonna pour in 500 grams total of water at 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's gonna be a pulse pour method. So we're gonna start by pouring some water in, letting it rest, and then pouring some more, letting it rest, and then finally putting that last bit of water in there. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, let me just kind of explain what you're gonna need. So first, you're gonna need a burr grinder. We're using the Fellow O Generation 1. Next, you'll need a gooseneck kettle. It is essential that you have that gooseneck because for making a pour over, you really want a slow and controlled stream of water that you can kind of manipulate to do what you want. And this is our Fellow variable temp kettle. Just gonna make sure that is set to the right temperature. You'll obviously need your brew device and then something to collect your coffee in. We are using the range server, a scale, and your coffee. So the recipe specifically, we are going to start by just rinsing our filter, getting the device preheated. So I'm gonna just take this guy. He's got a little seam down the side and I like to just fold it. And then I also like to open it up and crease it the other way just to allow it to fit really nicely in this device. And I typically use about 100 grams. I'll just gently place it with my fingers. Once you start to pour that water, it's gonna stick to the sides. And the purpose of this rinse is just to get everything nice and hot and to rinse away any paper taste. So I'm gonna let that drain while I just get into the specifics of the recipe. So once we get our coffee in there, we're gonna create a little divot with our finger. That's gonna just help to make a well so that when we start pouring water, it can access all of that coffee at the deepest part of your grounds bed. We're gonna be blooming the coffee, which is just, again, pre-wetting it. And that's gonna allow some CO2 and just natural gases to escape. And then just prepare that grounds bed for when we start pouring the rest of our water. So that bloom, I like to use about 3 times the amount of water as I start with my coffee. So we're starting with 33 grams. I'm gonna pour about 90 to 100 grams of water to just bloom it, let it sit. And that sitting time is a little bit longer. So it's gonna sit until about 45 seconds, again, to just release all of those gases. The fresher your coffee is, the more gases there will be to be released. And then at that point, I'm going to pour water to get it up to 300 grams. And I'm gonna try to do that in about 40 seconds. So a good thing to remember with this recipe is just every time you go up 100 grams or 200 grams, each 100 grams should be about a 20-second pour, which is a little bit slower than some people are used to. But I just like to do that because it kind of extends the time that my coffee is brewing. And so I would get it to 300 grams, wait 20 seconds, pour another 100 grams within 20 seconds, wait 20 seconds, and then pour that final 100 grams to get me to 500 grams of water. Now, I know that's a lot of numbers. In the bottom, we're gonna link our recipe just really clearly lined out so that you can follow along. But again, it's just trial and error, and it's just a skill to practice that you can get more comfortable with. So I'm gonna go ahead and grind my coffee. We are doing a grind setting of 3. That's about medium fine. I'm gonna just hit this tab here to release any leftover coffee. And I teared out my scale just to double check that I got all 33 grams back. Awesome. Here we are. All right, and then at this point, I am going to just level out my coffee grounds, create that divot that I mentioned earlier. Just very gently, you don't want to compact or force those grounds. I'm gonna make sure I tear everything out, and earlier I also made sure to dump that water out. And now that my water is to temp, I'm gonna grab it, start my timer, and begin pouring. So I just like to start right in the center to fill up that well all the way to the top, and then I'm just gonna very gently pour in a circle all the way around to make sure I coat all those grounds. All right. And it's important that you do cover all those grounds with water. So it's more important to do that than be a stickler about how much water you're using to bloom. So we got about 15 seconds here, and then we're gonna begin finishing that brew. And so when I start to pour my next, 200 or so grams, I'm gonna focus in the center at first, circle out, and then end back in the center, just because it's a little bit more dense there. And I just kind of trace, like you'll see when you brew, it's gonna create kind of this bubbly foam. And I just trace all the way around that, all the way to the edge. Nice, slow, and controlled. And then I circle my way back in. And I'm gonna try to finish this process around 1 minute and 25 seconds. So I want my scale to read 300 at that point. And it is a little tricky. You're gonna be glancing from your scale to your timer to your stream of water. If it's not perfect, that's totally fine. And we're gonna wait 20 seconds. So when you're pouring, you wanna make sure you maintain the same height all the way through. I prefer to be a little bit closer, about within 2 to 3 inches of the surface. Some people like higher, totally fine. You just wanna be consistent, because at those different heights, you will be changing how much you're agitating that grounds bed. And if you want to try to repeat or tweak a recipe, you just don't want to change too many variables at once. So I'm getting it up to 400 now. This should finish around 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Awesome. We're gonna wait that final 20 seconds and then pour that final 100 grams in. One thing to note too when you're pouring, you wanna make sure you go all the way out to cover your grounds, but you don't wanna spend too much time like getting on the edge where it's just filter. Because you want your water to always be in contact with those grounds and extracting them. So if I've timed this right, I should finish pouring my 500 grams by 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And then the recipe should finish draining around 3 minutes and 15 to 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you're trying this at home, you might not have the same grinder as me, or even if you do, there can be variance between grind settings. And so if your brew finishes too early, so like too quickly, what you would want to do is try to fine up your grinds a little bit. Vice versa, if your brew takes really long, you might want to coarsen up your grounds. It could be other factors. It could be how you are pouring. Maybe you're pouring really intensely, things like that. But if you follow kind of that timing that I gave you, really it would be the grind that you would need to change. But ultimately, it should be what you think tastes best. So now that this is done, I'm going to take this off. And I always like to stir or swirl my coffee. Whenever you brew coffee, you're gonna start to extract different solubles and flavors first, and then more will extract later on. And you just wanna make sure they're all mixed up so you can taste all those lovely flavors. And I usually let my coffee cool just a little bit, but we're just gonna go right in. So give it a taste here. So For me, I like that 15-to-1 ratio because I like how strong of a cup of coffee it is. That's not for you. A lot of people do a 16-to-1 ratio, which is 30 grams of coffee to start. But for me, I love the body. Even though it's hot, I can still really taste some of those sweet, fruity flavors. And I'm sure as it cools down, I'll get a lot more of those dynamic, different notes that are in the cup. This is a really fun skill to practice, to learn. You can change it up in so many different ways. Some people really like to agitate that coffee bed. Once you've poured water, they'll stir it to increase extraction, or you can change your temperature on your water, or even your ratio, grind settings. All of those different variables will change the outcome of your cup. But that V60 just really allows for a lot of that experimentation. So we hope that you try this and you like it and it has helped you with your coffee brewing at home. Have a great day.